In this lesson, we'll learn about Illustrator's Live Trace feature. Alright, now in the last lesson, we learned how we can bring files from outside applications here into Illustrator, and we brought in a couple of different image files. Now, I've gone ahead and brought in a new image file here that's a simplified line art version of our logo character. And you know what? One of the key advantages to Illustrator, as we talked about previously, is that vector artwork is scalable, meaning we can scale it to any size and there's not going to be any degradation in the artwork. With pixel-based artwork, you can't do that. You're going to eventually be able to see the pixels. Now, Illustrator comes with a really handy tool for actually converting pixel-based artwork into vector-based artwork. And I've got a couple of examples here we're going to actually take a look at. Now, this feature is called live tracing an object. Now, I'm going to go ahead and select this character right here, and I tell you what, let's go ahead and grab our appearance panel. We're going to actually watch that here in this lesson and take note of it at a couple different times. So let's go ahead and pull that out to the side and shrink that down a little bit so that it's not too big. And let's go ahead and zoom in on this character here. Now, we've got our character, and you know, this is just a simple black line art version of our character, but it's still based in pixels. If we zoom in real close on that, you can start to see the pixeled jaggy edges on it. So that's what we want to avoid. We want this to be a nice clean vector object. Now I'm going to go ahead and zoom out just a little bit because this next dialog is going to be rather large. Now by live tracing this, we're going to be able to convert it into vectors. So we have some options up here. If you look, we've got a live trace button right here, and we also have a little drop down menu right next to that. Now we can also get to live trace by coming into object and choosing live trace here, and there are some options here to make and expand, make and convert to a live paint, or tracing options. We're going to talk about expanding and live paint here in just a moment. Let's go ahead and select tracing options for right now. And we're going to get this dialog that comes open here. And I tell you what, let me go ahead and cancel that, move him down a little bit into the corner, and we can also get to that by coming down in this drop down and choosing tracing options. Now notice there's several different preset options for live tracing a bitmap image. And we can actually choose any of these, or by going into tracing options, we can actually configure the live trace tool based on our own settings. Let me go ahead and go back into those tracing options here, and let's drag that up. Alright, now using these live trace options is really going to take you a little bit of trial and error at first, but by eventually just understanding what kind of artwork you're tracing or what kind of image you're tracing, you'll better understand how to apply these settings. Now, we could come in here and apply one of these defaults here. And again, here's the defaults that we looked at in that previous menu. And, you know, we could, for this specific image, we could maybe choose comic art, something like that, or maybe even inked drawing, one of these options, and just take a look at which has a better tracing result for our bitmap image down here. Now, let's just go ahead and select comic art here. And notice that all these settings here changed based on that preset. And we also have a preview button here. Now, I'm going to try and avoid using this preview button too extensively because with larger images, it's actually going to take Illustrator longer to calculate what that's going to look like. So looking at that, the comic art option actually isn't too bad. Let's come down here and select the inked drawing and see what that looks like. You know, that one seems a little bit thick. I think I like that comic art look better, so let's go ahead and select that again. Alright. Alright, now there are a lot of different options here in this dialog, and we probably won't go into a lot of detail on each one of these, but let's take a look at a few of these. Let's look here at mode. Right now we have black and white, and right now the color options down here under palette and max colors are grayed out. Those are only available to us if we come in here and select the color option. Now in doing that, it's going to retrace my artwork because I have that preview box checked here. So we'll give it just a moment. And let's actually uncheck preview for right now. And you can see here under palette, you have the option for automatic. And you know what? If we had a custom swatch group created for colors to use tracing this image, we could actually select that here. Now, let's come back up here and switch this back over to black and white mode. We also have a grayscale mode in there as well. So we'll switch that to black and white, and we have a threshold slider available to us now. So by clicking on this little button here, you'll see we have a slider available to us here. Now this basically specifies a value for generating black and white with our tracing result. If we have a 200 threshold, all the pixels in our image that are lighter than that are going to be converted to white. All those that are darker than that are going to be converted to black. So that's what the threshold is going to do. We have an option here to blur the tracing result. excuse me, rather blur the image before the tracing is applied to it. Then we have a resampling option here, which will resample the original image before the tracing result is applied as well. Now, over here under trace settings, there are a number of different settings. We can tell it to trace and give us only fills as a result. We can get fills and strokes, or we can get only strokes. And we have several different tolerances here. I'm not going to go into all these, but these are tolerances for how the trace settings are applied. Now, there is a box down here at the bottom to ignore white, and anytime you're tracing an image like this one right here, where it has a white background or areas of white in it, and maybe we're only interested in keeping the black areas, we could actually check that ignore white button and nothing will be created for these white areas. If we leave that unchecked, it's actually going to create white shapes for these areas of white. So we have a couple different options down here at the bottom for viewing. We have for raster, and then we have for vector, and we're actually going to talk about those here in just a moment. Let's go ahead and, using this comic art preset, let's go ahead and trace our image here. Alright, so we can go ahead and zoom in on the result and take a look here at the appearance panel. Now we have basically a custom group called tracing. Now if we were to undo that, before it said linked file, but in redoing that, now it says tracing. We also have some preview options here with these two triangles up in the control panel. We have preview options for the raster image. We could look at the original image, an adjusted image, or a transparent image. And we have vector-based preview options. Right now we're looking at the tracing result. If we wanted to, we could look at outlines for our vector tracing. We could also look at the outlines with the tracing, just like so. Right now I'm going to go ahead and just say tracing result. Now notice here that I can't come in and select individual anchor points for our tracing. We have turned our pixels into a vector object, but we can't actually modify it yet. Now in order to modify this, we need to expand this. So we have a button up here to expand, and that's where you see under Object Live Trace, the option was to make and expand. So I tell you what, let's come over here and expand this right there. And you can see here what we've created is anchor points and paths around all of these shapes here that we've traced. Now notice here, I did not check that box to ignore the white space. So we've got white areas here where white shapes have actually been created. And we can select those if we come in with our direct selection arrow. And you can see here that I've selected a white fill shape here. Now, if you forget to deselect that option, or excuse me, select that option to ignore these white areas, you can always come in and delete those just simply by coming over to File, or actually choosing Select and choose Same Fill Color. And it's going to actually select all those white filled areas here in this tracing result. Being that those are the only white filled areas in this document, then we could just delete those. And selecting what's left here, you can see here what we're left with is only the black filled in areas. So it's only our line art. Now at this point we could go ahead and convert this into a live paint group if we wanted to and begin painting in some of these areas. Now we've already talked about live painting, but let's go ahead and come down here and take a look at this other image. This is a much more detailed image. In fact, it's a photograph. We can actually apply those live trace settings to this photograph as well. And remember, if we wanted to scale this image up to any size, this needs to be vector. We need to convert this into vector somehow. So let's go ahead and look at how we might do that using the live trace features. I want to go ahead and access the tracing options here again. And I tell you what, let's go ahead and look at a preset here. Before we do, let's go ahead and move this down into the corner and maybe zoom out one step. We'll come in and access those live tracing options again here. And I tell you what, let's look at some of these color presets. Maybe we check out one of these color ones in the color photo low fidelity here. And you can see that those settings have been applied here. And I tell you what, let's go ahead and preview that. Now this may take Illustrator just a moment to render this preview for us because there is a lot of information that it's processing here in this bitmap image that we have in our Illustrator file. So we'll just hang tight here as we wait for this, this little bar to finish its progress. Well, you know, it looks like it's slowing down. I tell you what, let me go ahead and pause the video until it's finished. Okay, so Illustrator's done rendering this preview for us, and you can see here that the preview is actually not bad. So, you know, I think I'm going to go ahead and accept this. So let's go ahead and hit Trace right now. And Illustrator is going to go about applying those settings to our object here. And I tell you what, let's go ahead and just zoom in and see what kind of detail we got. So even using that low fidelity tracing here, we've picked up a lot of the detail here from this photograph, and it's still very understandable. Imagine what we would have done, or what this would look like if we had used the photo high fidelity. So at this point, this photograph has now been converted into a vector object, and we can scale it at will. Now we could always come in and expand this tracing if we wanted to come in and make some changes to this photograph, but being that this is a fairly high detailed photograph, I don't think I'm going to expand that. So hopefully you can see exactly how valuable a tool this live tracing feature in Illustrator is. If we have some raster artwork or some pixel-based artwork, we can bring that into Illustrator and convert it into vectors so we can scale that to whatever size we need it to be. So in this lesson we've covered the live tracing features in Illustrator. In the next lesson we're going to wrap things up and talk about saving and exporting files.